All right, we are recording.
So are you familiar with Kurt Vonnegut's novels?
Oh
Some.
yeah,
So there's a religion in there.
Bokononism.
Yeah. And he really, I think his books were really very autobiographical. And I knew him.
You did. Oh,
Yeah.
lucky.
We're
At
well,
Cape Cod.
we shared a great grandfather or something. Um, and he had this thing called he said God forms people into teams to do God's work. And a team is called a chorus.
I
And
remember.
you don't get to know what the job is or who's on your team, but the focus of the team is called its wampeter. You don't get to know what your wampeter is either. There are groups of two that do get to know who's on their team because there's two of them. They die within a few minutes of each other. And that's called a dupras. And then there are other groups that are made by people like General Electric or the United States of America. And these are granfalloons. Now, a granfalloon, being an artificial cuirass, has nothing to do with God's work, and its wampeter is anything that focuses those people, right? So using this model, you know, how many people in these movements are surround the same wampeter in their grand? How many of them are actually in the same granfalloon? After 20 years of marketing segmentation on the internet, I suggest that they're all individual granfalloons. They have no idea. They think everybody else agrees with them, but they've never met. They sit in front of a screen all day and they come up with all this wild crap in their heads, but there's nothing to it. And then some people have attained power because now that attention is the biggest commodity and not information, because it moves people a lot faster. You get people like the president who fell into it because his personality is perfectly suited to an environment in which attention is the most powerful commodity.
So you think this is
He's
just a
in
fluke,
he's,
and we
he's
don't
an
have to worry
attention
about it?
addict.
What, Hugh?
So
You think this is
power
just a fluke?
power comes from attention. You get more attention, you get more power. So all the people that want power are trying to figure that out. And the ones that are in the inner circle have a better grip on it. But out there in the fringes where people do what somebody says they should do because they got a flag with a snake on it, you know, those people don't have a clue why they do that stuff.
No, a lot of them
So
don't.
they're not going to take any initiatives that make any sense, and their organization is going to be fragmented
I don't
and
think,
fall apart.
I'm sorry. I don't think that the members necessarily know what is, I don't think that they see the overall picture, because my theory is that this is a continuation of kind of MK Ultra mind control, and that, Trump and his team, and along with like companies like Cambridge Analytica, have used data mining to get these personality profiles. We know they've taken it that far. So then what do? You find out people, these disparate groups, like the anti-vaxxers who feel persecuted because they think people think they're kooks, but they console each other, right? Like, we understand each other. The rest of the world is attacking us, but we understand each other. And then, you get all those people that share that victimization and they play upon that. But you are right about the attention factor, that they all do want it. They want to find comfort in other people, and they do sit at home alone too much on a computer and that kind of stuff too. But I think they're being manipulated from a centralized. I think this was intentionally done, and it was created and fostered with a cult-like mentality. So what you were saying about the low information, it's not low information, because if you sit down and try to talk to any of them, they refuse to accept any information from you, because like in a cult, they're isolated and they're told, don't trust CNN, don't trust. Because my parents believe all this nonsense. They're not Q followers, but they believe all this complete bullshit. They don't check anything. And when I say, but mom, like, look at this thing. And she says, well, I don't believe that source. It's fake news. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how cults isolate people.
That's pretty low information though, you know, to just,
You don't need any information to take that approach. You just shoot everything down that
yeah.
you
Did
don't
you see
understand.
what they did to the media's? They had a pile of stuff. They had lighting, they had sound boxes and what have you, camera boxes. They trashed and destroyed it. They attacked the media. They hate the media. They crawled on the walls of the Capitol, kill the media.
Yeah, they would have attacked anything that was there.
Speaking of attack the media,
rationality.
just a slight change of the subject. I have been disappointed in the way that the mainstream media, particularly on television, CNN and MSNBC, are handling this, because we're getting a certain amount of information from them, which we all want, at least I want, you know, and I'm glad that there is a source for it, but they also, on those two channels, at least, that I have switched back and forth between, the commentators are, they are really dissing, I don't know, dissing all of the people, everybody who participated in this, understandably. I mean, everybody's mad. I certainly think these people are monstrous. A lot of them, most of them, maybe, I don't know. But
Few fine people.
this is not constructive, is what I'm trying to say. If you insult people, call them names, derogate them constantly, and get all of your guests on your show to talk about about how awful they are, what horrible people, blah, blah, blah. That's just going to make them angrier, and it isn't constructive.
Yeah, but nobody wants to be constructive.
Sorry?
Nobody's trying to be constructive. They're trying to make money, and the only way you make money is with attention.
Well, that's true. That's very true. That's the problem. That's what
I don't agree. You're talking about making money. You're talking about the media. You're talking about CNN and MSNBC.
Right. Commercial media. Yeah. I mean, it's like gossip. That's what the tone, the flavor is like, malicious gossip. I mean, I'm not in any way defending the people who perpetrated this nightmare at the Capitol. No way am I defending them. I'm just saying that to gang up on, for everybody to get together to gang up on them, and especially on television and like that, it's not going to make them go away. It's not going to make them rethink what they've done. And I think that there are some who would rethink. I think there's some people who are just plain did not know what the hell they were doing. Like, there was a woman who said, well, I didn't know what we were doing was against the law. Well, maybe she's stupid. Maybe she is completely
Well,
naive.
there was a breakdown in the prevailing paradigm, right? The dominant conversation in which the president was a president and not a delusional maniac.
Yeah.
Because he was a president, right? So this whole agreed upon worldview that we have a country and there's a president and there's a democracy and there's a system and stuff was all delusional, and the delusion wore a little bit thin.
Yeah.
There was a breakdown, there was a collapse. And what happened then was that all the people, including all those lawmakers who gave fervent speeches about what a terrible thing this was, when an hour before they'd been waving them forward.
Right.
Everybody is scrambling to find the high end of a sinking ship now.
That's right.
Because this collapse was a real break in a worldview that was very widespread. And now that it's broken, everybody's going, oh my God, what happened? You know, I got to find some dry ground.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are all completely desperate, especially the media, especially the talking heads, especially the politicians on all sides. They're all looking for the place that's going to, where they're still going to be dry in a few days,
I'm kind of disappointed in the media for this. It seems like they're not connecting all these dots. There's parts of the story that, like you said, they inflame and they focus on, but the overall picture of, you have this whole operation going on behind the scenes with the messaging on Parler, the organization of this. Now, it'll take them some time, but I'm assuming if the Department of Justice or someone does a proper investigation, they'll subpoena people's social media accounts, their bank records, their phone records, to try to see who in Donald Trump's upper echelon, if anybody, was organizing this and telling them, they're saying, well, when Donald Trump stood there and said, go fight and all this, that it's very vague, like they can't hold him accountable. It's going to be hard to hold him accountable because he didn't specifically say, break down the doors and threaten people. He just said, go up there and fight. But if you could find a nexus between people in his administration that organized this ahead of time, we know it was organized ahead of time. We know they were given by someone specific orders to charge the Capitol because they've stated that themselves. But I feel like the media is not pulling all this together. You have a video of Don Jr. and the whole Trump family there watching this big screen, and Don Jr. says, okay, guys, T-minus a couple seconds and it's going to go down. What is he talking about? They're watching this happen. And then why did Trump delay sending anyone into help for an hour? There were people inside calling. They went on about Benghazi, which I'm not a Hillary Clinton fan by any means, but they went on for years about Benghazi, about how she left these people stranded there who were being attacked and she didn't send aid. And now you've got Trump sitting there watching it on a big screen, members of Congress being attacked, and he does not send them any help. He actually doesn't let Governor Hogan wanted to send some people to help, and he wouldn't let them. So what?
We're all pretty familiar with that, but the negotiation as to what is going to be the narrative has not been completed.
I think that's a very important part of it. I think the narrative is something that really needs to be thought out and defined.
It won't be thought out and defined. It'll be the result of the negotiation. There's a lot of people floating narratives now. They're all trying to get their narrative to stick to the wall. Flynn and them, they've got it too. But the narrative that was in place has exploded. And now there's a lot of players trying to get theirs to be the narrative.
They describe the press as being the first draft of history. The press isn't there to do a systematic analysis of what's going on. They're just telling you what they see in front of their eyes. You can be certain that this is going to be investigated. I mean, this was the worst assault on our nation's capital that we've ever had. They're not going to just push it under the rug, no matter how much the Republicans would like to do that. But what this tells us, and I've said this many times in this group, it exposes the weaknesses in our Constitution. How is it that that one person, the majority leader of the Senate, can completely shut down governance in this country? How is it that the individual states can decide what voters they want to suppress and get away with doing it? We don't do any kind of economic planning in this country at all, not in any kind of planning analysis. And the consequence is that a lot of those people who were pulling this stunt the other day were the people who were hurt by the rusting of the Rust Belt, and everybody ignored them. And that rage has been building. I've seen this rage going back several decades now. And I've seen this resentment, but people have no way of expressing that rage, especially if you don't have very much education. There's not much you can do. And then all of a sudden, somebody like Donald Trump comes along, who definitely has charisma. There's no question about that. And he speaks the language of working class people.
It doesn't matter that he doesn't do anything for them while in office.
That's right. It really doesn't matter because he empathizes with their pain and and they can identify with that. And so this expresses much deeper problems than just the other thing is the complicity. Duke Jones was saying that that policeman that was killed, some of the press looked into his background and they looked at his Facebook page, and he was a super right-wing guy. And most of those cops there identified with the protesters.
And that's why they let everybody get through. That's why they were able to do it, because the cops just waved them on.
That's right.
Right.
You're leaving something out. You're leaving out hate. You're leaving out bigotry. So many of the people who went to that Capitol building there are haters. They're white nationalists. They're anti-Semites. And so it's not just their frustration or their angst. They're haters. And they come from generations of haters. And that's not going to get fixed by the economy.
Well, but those are just the people who showed up for this thing.
Well, yeah, that's the reality.
The whole busload from Bensalem went.
Really? Martin, I used to be from Bensalem. Martin's from there. It's really.
Yeah, near Philadelphia, suburb, a working class suburb near Philadelphia.
Vermont is tracking the people that came back from the buses to DC to watch for a big spike.
Yeah.
And when the big spike comes, they'll isolate it like we've been doing since November now.
Well, the political right.
We've only got like one outbreak going on in Vermont right now, but yesterday there were 80 people that came out of some Christmas church services. But they know where and when.
The political right is calling for January 17th for the same thing to happen in all the state capitals.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one guy that was involved in the plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer was actually at this incident a couple days ago. And I'm just like, so this guy was involved in a plot to kidnap a governor and take her across the lake to Wisconsin and try her and execute her under their own court system that they made up. And he's back out at the Capitol continuing to commit terrorist acts. I mean, it's insane to me. They'll keep somebody in jail for a small offense, like you were saying, because of race and all others. They'll keep some people in jail and waiting for trial on a small offense forever. But a guy who plotted terror in Michigan is now in DC already again. Yeah, it's incredible. Hugh makes a good point. Hugh makes a good point, though, about the emotional connection that these people are feeling with Donald Trump and with the movement, because when you give them the information, put it right in front of their face to prove what they're being told is complete crap. The reason they reject it is not necessarily because they're stupid, but because it would require them to break that emotional bond that they feel with the people in their group. That's their family, and they will not turn on their family no matter how much you put in front of them.
It's their cult.
It is a cult.
That's what.
Put it that they're not information driven. They are citizens of the attention age. They're stimulus response driven.
They're not even thought driven, because I mean, I don't think that the majority of, if I can talk about them as a monolith for a minute, I don't think most of them knew that they would end up losing their job and being arrested and charged and maybe going to jail and maybe even for a long time. And they're bragging about what they've done and showing videos of what they've done. But I have a theory. And my theory is that these are authoritarian personalities. And I think those are the kinds of people who are vulnerable to cult leaders. They need a person in authority to tell them what to do. They don't have the confidence in their own judgment, in their own ability to solve problems or to, make a good life for themselves. they need somebody, a father figure, a king, a president, a cult leader, or somebody that they look up to as a power greater than themselves, to tell them how to live, what to do, what to think, and so on. And in order to do that, they suspend all of their own faculties. And I mean, it just amazed, one of the things that just amazed me about them was how blind they were to what the consequences of what they were doing. I mean, consequences to themselves.
A lot of them are being arrested.
And I think that that's the appeal of, that was Trump's appeal to them. That's how he appealed to them. I think he himself is obviously very authoritarian, as was his father. And he grew up in a brutally authoritarian household. I think there is a personality type there. And
I was on the steps of the Pentagon one night, surrounded by MPs who were reaching through the line. The marshals were reaching through the line and clouting people on the head and dragging them away. And we were protesting the war, and we were trying to shut down the Pentagon. And we thought that there was enough of us who thought this way that we could actually change things and make a difference. Years later, I met a person who had been LBJ's personal bodyguard and Hubert Humphrey's bodyguard in the Secret Service. And he said, "Oh, that was quite a time." He said, "We looked across the barricade at you guys and we saw your eyes glittering with hatred. And we were convinced that there was a vast movement out there that was going to take down the US government. And we were ready to shoot." Now, in retrospect, we were just a crowd of kids on the steps of this building that was locked and we couldn't possibly get into, surrounded by crowds.
Well, wait a second. You could have got into it because you could have done what these people did on Wednesday.
No, because the guys that were surrounding us had their bayonets fixed.
The
See, I'm
police
telling
had
you-
guns. You chose not to. It's not
No.
like you couldn't. You chose
No.
not to.
No, we didn't choose anything. We were delusional. I'm still proud that I was there. But
Do
we
you
were
think
delusional.
you would have tried? Do you think you would have tried to charge in if you knew somebody inside the Pentagon had made it safe for you and cleared the way and told
Well,
everybody?
that's not the
to get
point.
out?
The point is that
Not your point.
our estimation of how many of us there were and what a force for good we were was way off the mark. And we didn't have an internet then.
yeah,
Now, if we were the same people now, but we'd all been on Twitter for 4 or 5 years, we would have probably been far more delusional in our estimate of how many we were and how cohesive we were and how thoughtful we were and how wise our leaders were. And we would have failed just like these clowns at the Capitol did, because they're in this illusory world. It's not real.
how old were you, Peter?
Oh, I forget. I think it was 67 or 8 or
Okay.
so. So
Yeah.
I was, well, in 68, I would have been 20.
Well, you were not, your brain wasn't fully developed yet.
Well, you
And-
can
and-
explain why I was an idiot to be there. I don't contest that. I'm saying that all the people there with me and the thousands and thousands who showed up that afternoon at the beginning of it, and the few dozen who were left in the morning to walk back across the river unmolested, we had no idea. We didn't know that our government was ready to mow us down with machine guns. I found
Yeah.
out that from a guy who was there on the other side 20, 30 years later. We had
So
no
you
idea.
you didn't understand that threat, but yet they were sitting in there with all the power, looking at you saying, if they come at us, we have to shoot them. So they did perceive you as a threat then.
They
I
thought we
hearing
were
that?
communists. We
Well,
didn't.
you made an impact on them if they were ready to shoot you.
And that was
It had
about,
nothing. It had nothing to do with the impact
Silence.
that anybody wanted to make. It was just all a tremendously misguided, misunderstood piece of insanity that happened.
And that was also about the same time that the Ohio students were shot and killed too.
It was before that, I
That's
think.
right.
I don't think we had any idea that that was going to happen. That was a shocking event.
Yeah.
That really
was
set a
awful.
lot of us back.
So I want to disrupt things a little bit because Mike wrote an article that I headlined today that takes a kind of a different perspective. And so, did any of you read it?
Yeah. I
Mike?
reacted, yeah.
So, Mike, why don't you try to summarize what the article was about?
Well, I don't know about summarizing. Yes. I found something very positive in what happened on Wednesday, in that it was a response, although an unconscious response, to the call for an uprising that Michael Moore had made last week on Op-Ed News. He said, why aren't we out in the streets in an uprising? And it seems to me that when it happened on Wednesday, very few people saw it in those terms of a popular uprising that was complemented on the left by the Black Lives Matter uprising during the summer. There is a major uprising taking place in the United States with a left wing and a right wing. What keeps us apart is the interest of the establishment to keep us at each other's throats and not to recognize the common ground that we have, because if we united, it's an old story, if the left and the right united, if blacks and whites united, they'd overthrow this government. And I was happy to see Mitch McConnell under his desk and Nancy Pelosi under her desk and her office ransacked, and people standing at the podium who belong there much more than Pelosi or Mitch McConnell does. Having ordinary people in the Congress is an image of the way the world should be. I was encouraged by this.
Oh, God.
Wrong
And it
people.
reminded me, just one last point, it reminded me of the Sandinista revolution that triumphed in 1979. They also occupied their parliament and took it over and scared the hell out of the Somosistas. And they were left and right united in overthrowing that man. It's possible to do. So looking at that history, looking at what's playing out before our eyes, I find very encouraging.
You know, I've published so many articles, I've done so many interviews with protesters who have engaged in civil disobedience, but it's peaceful civil disobedience. And I think that's the important thing. I mean, 5 people died, and police were assaulted violently. There's a lot of destruction. I support protest. I support civil disobedience. And I think that what you're talking about, Mike, can be done without the kind of violence. And there's hate too. And I think that somehow the energy that was expressed there needs to be redirected in a better way. But still,
Could I just respond to that just briefly?
Go for it.
I think that's always kind of the refrain, I think, that we make here in the United States, as if the breaking of glass, and I realize that people were killed, and I realize that people lost their lives this summer too. It's always the response that people in the United States make when windows are broken or fires are set in situations like this. Oh, this is not peaceful demonstration. Peaceful demonstration is not the American way. And to think that it is and to hold us to that standard is unrealistic. Every single day, we're bombing buildings, we're shooting people, we're droning people all over the world by the score every single day. And for us to say, oh, gee, anybody in the United States who protests because this is the American way, it's not the American way. It's the way perhaps of the civil rights movement under the aegis of Martin Luther King or that group of people, but it's not the American way. And it's hypocritical for us to voice that refrain.
I think you're going to have to write an article about that, Mike.
If you notice too, what to your point about the Sandinistas, I think when people, whenever people get to a certain point economically, where they're so, just, our country's been economically struggling for so long now that, workers start to demand things like $15 an hour. They start to say, hey, you know what? You got Jeff Bezos make $4 billion and I'm struggling to even pay rent. Something's messed up here. And like the labor movements in the, 1890s, as soon as people start coming out and saying, we're not being treated fairly in the society, this economic inequality is kind of bullshit, then the right wing comes out of nowhere and starts looking for people among us, whether it's turning white people against black people or whether it's saying right wingers telling us that workers' movements are communist movements. I mean, they definitely manipulate us against each other. But the problem is that the people who are on the right, they are like us. They're suffering the same things we are. But they don't realize they're being weaponized against us. All we're trying to do is get a fair wage and like affordable housing and healthcare. But they always fall prey to the capitalist structure that uses them to help oppress us.
Excuse me, your screen says Juke Jones. What's your name?
This is Michelle.
Michelle. Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Juke Jones is my
Why does it say
podcast partner. Juke Jones is my podcast partner. Yes.
Okay. That's Michelle Goddard, right?
Goddard. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Welcome.
I'm reading a book. The title is American Nations, a history of 11 rival regional cultures of North America. There is nothing united about the people of this country. This author identifies 11 regional cultures in this country. There are other books like this who identify a different number of regions, but we're extremely culturally different. This country was settled by the French, by the Spanish, by the British, by the Germans and the Norwegians and the Swedes, and on and on.
The blacks.
Yeah, they're all very competitive with each other. They have a very different cultural perspective on things. And then you look at how the Constitution was written by the wealthy to protect the wealthy, and all there is cleavages throughout the whole political social history of this country. It took Howard Zinn to write the People's History of the United States, and that was after years of his realizing that the history that people are taught is basically a bunch of lies.
Yes.
And nobody really understands the actual history that we come from. And so it's a real dilemma. There are people throughout the world who are betting on when this country is going to implode, because where most of them come from homogeneous cultures of one kind or another, we don't. And I think they don't see how we can hold it together indefinitely.
Well, I think I've read maybe the same book about all the many cultures. And I was thinking about it, but the book I read was a few years ago. It's not a recent book, but I was thinking about it even before you said what you just said, because I remembered that, a part of my family comes from Appalachia, okay, in Tennessee. And there are a lot of mountain people, mountaineers, as we call them, who live in Tennessee, in Appalachia. And many of them don't work. They will take their gun out and shoot things for dinner. At least it was that way when I lived there way back during the war. But this book identified that culture through that whole section of the country as coming from northern England up close to the Scottish border, up close to Hadrian's Wall, where there really, for most of the time, for most of history, there was no clear boundary. There was no clear, and people were crossing that border all the time and claiming this was our property, this is our land, no, this is our land, you know, back and forth and so on. And there was no no social control. The people were the same people who, the descendants of those people living in Appalachia, who, when I was growing up, and it may still be true, they're parts of some of those states that are called the Free State, because there's one in Virginia. There was, maybe still is, a Free State in Virginia. I think there was one in New York. My husband talked about it.
I used to live in it in Virginia.
Sorry?
I was a denizen of the Virginia Free State.
Were you really? So
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about then. But they wouldn't let, you know, no police or sheriffs or anybody like that would dare enter. They were just left alone. And they had Johnson with the no, I guess maybe it was Roosevelt. Yeah, with the jobs. They had a program of taking people out of Appalachia and training them, taking them and to these camps or residences where they would be put through a training program to get good jobs and get an education and all that kind of thing. Well, they hated it. They left and went back home. They liked their way of life. They didn't want to wear shoes, for one thing. You know, my history of living in that area, I still don't like to wear shoes. I don't.
Our history is filled with those kind of cultural divisions, and people don't understand each other. I mean, there was a time when I was a kid in Chicago, the neighborhoods were so ethnically divided that if one ethnic person walked into another ethnic neighborhood, they could get beaten up. You didn't have to be black. I mean, you could, I don't know. Yeah, we've got serious problems.
I want to throw something in about Tennessee.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, because this is my home territory. When I was in school and we were talking about American Indians, it turns out a lot of my classmates are the grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Cherokees. And one of the things that happens when a group is suppressed is that people start lying about their ethnicity. Like I'll give you an example from another group. My Spanish teacher, who had grown up in Ecuador, her family had come from Poland, and she didn't figure out until she was in her 20s that they were Jewish, because her father didn't want to tell her, because that was a difficult road there. But the father of Sequoyah, who made the Cherokee alphabet, was a Scots trader. The Scots came and intermarried in all of these areas. And one of my classmates, she grew up in South Carolina and in Alaska. And at some point she was taking an anthropology class, and they were taking dental molds and whatever. And her teacher said, "You're Asian." And she said, "No, no one in my family." But it turns out her grandmother told her the story of how she had worked as a seamstress in the factories, but they had hidden the fact that they were Cherokee because it was illegal. So anyway, there's a lot
Illegal? What was illegal?
to be Cherokee, because this is a long story, and the Cherokee history is they had their own nation. And when their nation fell apart, a part of them moved westward to Oklahoma, and Sam Houston was part of this. Sam Houston was raised by a Cherokee tribe after he ran away from home. So, and he was very much affiliated with the Cherokees in Oklahoma, married to a Cherokee woman for a while. So, who was related to Will Rogers, who was from the same tribe. So anyway, there's a lot of intermarriage and intermingling that people don't, the purity tests don't work, is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say. So let me just drop it there. I'll go on forever.
It was good. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Dave. I'd
Are
like
we
to,
going to play the game? Are we going to get started on the questions game that Hugh came up with?
What's Leon wanted to say?
I just wanted to respond to Mike's point for just maybe 2 minutes. Well, people are talking about the diversified population. You know, that we're a mixed race of people with vastly different cultural backgrounds, histories, and all of that. And you know, I live in the New York City area where on any given subway car, there's 17 different languages being spoken, you know, relatively harmoniously. So I have a distorted view of that. I remember driving through Idaho one time and pulling into a diner, and I thought I was going to be on the menu in about 10 minutes. You know, saw my New York plates, and I was obviously, you know, a deer hunter or whatever. Anyway, that's so that makes us easily prey to this, what I want to say. The CIA has destabilized almost a third of the world's countries, has overthrown the governments of 70 or 80 governments since its inception in 1947. They are masters at controlling the narrative of a society, primarily by buying the media and creating a message and repeating the message and turning people against themselves and creating division and causing the society to collapse. They're doing it here. I mean, it's the same entities. And the CIA, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on December 16th released an article. I'm sorry, Rob's not sitting there. It's called, you know, revealing who he thinks the real.
I'm right here. I'm just
Oh, good, Rob.
6 feet away.
Who is the real deep state? And let's stop arguing among ourselves and focus that on them. And he's the third generation of Kennedys to be literally face to face up against the CIA, who are nothing but representatives of the top corporations and top bankers of the world. And, you know, he lost his father and his uncle and his cousin, John Jr., as soon as John Jr. decided he was going to go into politics. So now, I don't know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has Parkinson's, and it may be advanced, and he may be saying, all right, look, my days are numbered, so I'm going to pull out all the stops and go for it. But he brought to my attention, and well, just, I think what happened Wednesday, and I'm sorry I missed the first half hour. I keep thinking this starts at 7:30, and I blew it again. But what I saw on Wednesday was a clearly choreographed, I saw police turn around, casually walk away, and let people enter the Capitol building.
Right.
And Rob emailed to me a tweet from a real social pioneer, David Petchbeck, I think his name is. Kind of a psychedelic philosopher, but he's got some great social theories. He's got a number of books, a couple of movies, really bright guy. And he texted that he saw police moving barricades out of the way, again, rather casually, to let the mob get up the steps and go into the building. And there were more than 3,000 National Guards, heavily armed riot troop, National Guard, 3 blocks away, that were not brought in until it was all over.
I wondered
I
if
was
that
gonna
was the
ask you-
White House that
So-
was controlling the Capitol Police.
So,
I wondered if that was
well,
Trump.
it's
No?
really hard to
think it
say.
would
I
be-
can't imagine that Trump really has the authority to say stand down to everybody. I mean, he's the president, but
Actually, what he did in the weeks preceding it was he removed some of the leaders of the military and he replaced them with temporary appointments of
So-
people who he could control. So he
That-
did. And we know that, I think Michelle brought it up, that Larry Hogan tried for 90 minutes to send in troops and he couldn't because he had to get permission first and he couldn't get the permission. So, the thing is, Liam, I think we're on the same page when it comes to observing that the police facilitated this, but maybe we're looking at different reasons and motivations behind it. I think that a lot of those police were oath keepers.
Yes.
say it again.
Oath keepers.
Oath keepers.
Oath keepers or
Go ahead. Michelle, say what they are.
oath keepers or the QAnon cult, because they have infiltrated law enforcement just like white supremacists have. And
Yeah.
I was saying before you came on, Liam, that I believe that this Q cult, because it's impossible to believe with you got NSA and Google and all these places that spy on us 24 hours a day, that the United States government doesn't know who Q is. The Trump administration knows who Q is, and I believe that it's the CIA, mind control, that they've used all the data mining that they've gathered from social media, and that they've used these psychological techniques to create this Q cult, that Michael Flynn is now the leader of it.
Yeah.
And so some of these people at the Capitol, because I saw video of police literally fighting people.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
see other police letting them in. So I think Rob is right that some of these, because it's being spread on the internet, you're going to get some police officers who 100% support the people that were coming in there, but then other ones who don't. So
Yeah.
I think that's what we're seeing there. But I definitely agree with you that the CIA they've obviously continued their mind control techniques to get people to act how they want them to act. And I think that's what's going on right now. And the disturbing thing is that, I think that they're going to use, martyrdom. And I think that they're going to do other terrorist attacks. I think this I kind of disagreed with Peter that I think it is extremely widespread. And you won't get a lot of people who will take it to that highest level of pipe bombing and that kind of thing. But if you have 500,000 people that are devoted to this idea, even 100,000 people, what percentage of those people are going to say, oh, well, so-and-so was a martyr and she lost her life? You already have people martyring this woman who was shot. And we know how that works in other extremist movements. The martyrdom of the first person that dies spurs on other people to throw themselves on the flames.
How many of you have seen the video that she made? The woman who was shot and killed? How many of you have seen the video that she made?
I did not.
Oh my God.
At the event?
No, she was sitting in her car talking.
Howdy, everybody.
Hey, Bill.
What was she doing? I
I'm
didn't see
going to try to dig it up and play it for you here. By the way, you got to see did you guys see my hat?
MAGA?
Yeah, I didn't recognize you.
It says, we just did 46, because it's Make America Great Again. So this is the response. There you go.
Oh.
You took all my wind out of my sails, Bill.
I got the bumper sticker too.
I would like to know why anybody thinks, any of you, what do you think the objective of the CIA? Why would they want to divide the country like that? What are they after?
The state-
The country.
It for one thing, it totally obfuscates any genuinely progressive dissent.
Yes.
Because now I have a feeling the day of the inauguration is going to be worse than what we saw on the 6th. Michael Moore is saying, there's thousands of these people who are planning events all over the country. I think the 17th, some of you know, I do astrology, the 17th shows a particularly conflictual day.
Really?
And the entire next 2 years are just rife with polarization and conflict on an ongoing basis. So why are they doing it? You have to, I mean, I think we have to go a little bit beyond, and it gets, I really have to muster up all my courage to say this, but we're in line for a great reset of a world digital currency. And I'm not going to say much about it because I don't understand it enough to explain it clearly, and I don't understand it well enough to describe why it's not a good thing. But the central bankers of the world are joining together and slowly introducing a way of controlling every single transaction that happens on the planet, a way of controlling every single individual that lives on the planet, and a way of getting, they can choose whatever percentage they want of every single transaction that happens on the planet. It's in the works. It's on the way. And if you listen to Gary Null, put out a thing on Wednesday morning before the event happened. Gary Null interviewed a number of people. I don't know how many of you are aware of James Corbett. James Corbett's an incredibly devoted research, investigative journalist. He's done a lot of really good documentaries. I don't want to take up too much more time, but it has to do with us being trapped in a cashless digital currency that will control every single aspect, directed by a very, very, very small group.
I gotta say, I don't
Well,
like.
question. I got a question. How is this all going to be done utterly without anybody noticing? Is it going to be so subtle that nobody will even notice?
It's going to
What are
be
we going to pay? What are we going to pay our money with? Are we still going to use dollar bills?
No, there won't be bills. It'll be done because you'll be begging for relief. The world economy is ruined. All right. What Main Street USA this year will show a lot more pain than it showed last year. But there's a lot of mom and pop operations that have been shoved off the board and their business has been scraped up by Bezos and the other guys. That is happening. That you can observe. That you can drive down Main Street and see shuttered stores whose business is now going to the mega box stores. So that's one thing. The top 1% wealth grew 27% this year. 27% in 1 year. That's the best stock market bet anybody ever could get. That's one piece of evidence. And as I say, I'm not really prepared to stand behind it 100%, but I'm going to do some research and I will argue that the thing for me is, so what's so bad about that?
I sometimes think that I'm about 5 times as paranoid as any of y'all. Because first of all, the people with all the money know exactly what's happening to the planet. They know more. 30 years ago, the oil companies knew we were going to get global warming and spent all that money to cover it up.
That's right.
So my paranoid fantasy is that they're trying to find a way to cut off 3/4 of the population of the world. And that would take a load off the planet and things would kind of go back to normal and then have their own little Eden for them to live in, and they would have saved humanity.
I think that's what AIDS was about.
What?
What do you mean, cut off 3/4 of the planet?
Get rid of,
let them
remove
die off.
5.2 million, a billion people from the planet?
Well, that's not hard to do. People only live 60, 70 years under good conditions.
I believe that's what AIDS was about, because AIDS turned up at exactly the time that the technology to create it was developed. And
there's another fanatical side to this, which is the idea that if there's going to be Armageddon, then the thing to do is speed it up.
Well, here we are, guys.
So it happens real quick and leaves a livable planet. And it's
How do you like it? I think it's been going on for 20 years. How do you like it so far?
So that's my paranoid fantasy. I dare you to top that.
Well,
no fair
That's a high bar,
invoking,
Peter.
no fair invoking aliens from another planet. That's not. in
Okay,
the
I
cards.
would like to support your paranoid fantasy by well-researched reality. That's what I would like to be able to do. So,
Well, you don't need to research it really hard because you can see what's going on. The
well,
levels of poverty and starvation and immiseration on the planet.
in terms of, I'm sorry, dear. I know you're not Morgan Le Fay, but that's what it says on your screen. Meredith?
Meredith, yes, I don't know why that got on there.
In terms of what Meredith asked, what is it? Why would the CIA do this?
Yeah.
It is to absolutely end any chance of any kind of socialist progression happening in this country. Bernie Sanders won 60% of every poll that he ever ran in. They know that people want socialized. We want Medicare for all of the things on that platform. And are we ready to rattle the cages the way that the people that we saw on Wednesday are rattling the cages? I don't think that's not our style.
Well, we may not be any more competent than those idiots are.
Well, Jimmy Dore said something last night. I don't know when he said it, but I heard it last night that I thought was absolutely totally on target, and it reminds me of what you're saying, Liam. Is that how I say your name?
Liam.
Liam.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, he said that it's so wrong for people to be divided into left and right, Republican and Democrat. That's not where the division is. That's not where the significant division is. The significant division is between the 1% and the rest of us, between the elites who run the Democratic Party, for example, and the
Republican Party.
wealthy people who fund all of both parties, and all the rest of us. And that's where we should be focusing our resistance, if you will. And so I was just thinking we should maybe team up with those people from the Free State or wherever they're from. Maybe
It also reminds me of the Zapatistas. They created a free state in Mexico as well, and that's pretty recent that they did that. I think 1993 was when they did that.
Yeah, and how many of them were murdered? I mean, how many thousands of them were murdered?
I don't think that many.
Really?
No.
So is it a success?
Yeah, it's still going on now.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I'm happy to hear that.
it has its limits in its potential to metastasize through the rest of the world. I say that we're still in a.
Well, I would prefer you use the word propagate, because what the Zapatistas did was a good thing.
Well, either way, spread.
Well, metastasize suggests bad, malignant.
Okay, well, it's just a term, but we're in a feudal power structure, and I don't think it's ever been anything but. It's just got a lot of new labels from time to time.
Well,
So when we talk
Peter,
about
I got to say,
we should focus.
I have to respond to your cynicism. Look, I've been in the world of positive psychology for like 35 years or something, from 35 years. And I'm a lot more optimistic than you. I think that our lives are better now in a lot of ways. And I think that there's more transparency in a lot of ways. And what's happened is, as that transparency has increased, like the FOIA request, the request for information from the government, that didn't exist 30 or 40 years ago. And they keep on refining it and making it better and better. Whistleblowers, they've given whistleblowers more rights and protections. And what that does is it uncovers a lot of shit. And that's what we're seeing. But part of the reason
optimistic.
Well, look,
I'm more optimistic with I have a basis for my optimism in the fact that we're all face to face on screens now, billions and billions of us every minute. I think that is the basis for optimism,
Yeah, I think
because
so too.
we've been
To light
segmented into
raft.
these little worlds, but now we're synchronizing our worldviews again.
It's a
It's
paradox.
possible that community can go much farther than it ever has before.
I think
It's-
one of my first articles I wrote was about that, about how people being able to have a friend halfway around the world makes it a lot harder for our government to convince us to go and kill those people over there, because we actually might know them and have a day-to-day communication and relationship with them. But to Liam's point though, too, the pattern of the CIA destabilizing countries to go in basically for corporations to go in and get what they want, it was pretty much like an American thing. But since corporations went multinational now, I think the CIA has kind of morphed into this. That's why you're seeing this Q thing also in England, in Germany, and these other places, because they figured out that all of us around the world are like, hey, this isn't really about race. It's about the 1% and the 99%. So we're figuring it out. And so now they have to do a massive disruption to keep us from saying we're not going to tolerate this inequality anymore. They have to do it here in America because we're the last place, we're the only place they haven't done it. We live in a blindness that we don't know we've done this to every other country around the world.
Right.
And now they're bringing it home to us because we're starting to ask for things.
May I make a point, please? Liam, Bob, and I have been having a separate conversation. At one point, we decided to, I was saying that, in order to think in a systematic and orderly manner, you have to think in terms of what questions. And so I wrote out 26 what questions on the issue of campaign finance reform. And I put it in the chat box in pages format and a PDF format. So I hope you can open it. But, if we're going to think seriously about any of these issues, we have to do it in a systematic and orderly manner. This is not intuitive. There are so many factors that one has to evaluate with respect to any subject. And you're not going to do it. It's not a guessing game. It's not a values game. It's not an intuition game. And so this is an example of how, I would approach thinking about campaign finance reform. And you might look at it and think about it, because you could take that same approach and apply it to these issues as well. And it becomes then very complex.
It's a very thoughtful list, I have to say. And
Yeah, it looks good. Yeah,
But
definitely. We
Bob would
should get
agree.
into it.
yeah,
I found that thing I was looking for, the woman who was shot. You interested in seeing that? I can share that.
Sure, yes, please.
Let me just pull that up. It's a minute and a half. And
Bear in mind that you're going to be playing it for the general public again. Being in this as a recording.
it was on Instagram.
Well,
right.
we'd like to
So
see
you're
it
going to
now.
be, whatever it is, you're going to be giving it more life now.
Well, that's okay.
Just saying.
Yeah, that's all right. Here it is. Can you see?
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, I can see it.
Well, you got to get the sound going.
Kamala? Where is Kamala?
Here you go.
Or where is everybody? Huh? You got where is Kamala? Where is Kamala? Talking about ISIS like KKK. We got this Margaret Karen. You know what? We have thousands of people on the other side of the border. Your people can't get to work. Our economy is going to take an absolute tank because you guys refuse to choose America over your stupid political party. I am so tired of it. You try to make it with these wide angle lenses, and you this is crazy. Okay, like well, everybody wants immigration, but we need to do it the right and correct way. This is getting out of control, and you guys are lying. Why are you lying? Why are you lying? And why are you so worried about what everybody else is doing? I want to talk about what you're doing. Like I said, you can consider yourself put on notice. Me and the American people. I am so tired of this. I am woke, man. This is absolutely unbelievable. Get your shit together. Thank you. But where is everybody? Huh? Huh? You got where is Kamala?
Enough. I've seen enough. Like Lindsey Graham said, I've seen enough.
We got this Margaret Karen. You know what? We have that.
Sorry, there you go.
Yeah,
So,
well, Trump's the one who's not doing anything about all her.
You know who she is? She's the woman that was killed.
Yeah.
this is the woman who was shot attempting to enter the chamber where the House of Representatives,
Wow.
where the representatives were. Mike,
If you listen closely to what she was saying, any of us could agree with her issues. That's
Absolutely.
the point.
I couldn't hear her closely because she was so much a wacko. I couldn't.
Well,
You talked about California.
She's ranting.
I could kind of relate
but
to
she's
that.
ranting about
Yeah.
the issues that we all care about.
Yeah,
Every
I
one
think
of
so
us here.
too. Yeah.
There's
Well,
nothing she said that we could not endorse.
Well, that's
Psychotic
why I
people
think we
are-
need to
are
come
very
together with
engaging.
them and all of us storm the Capitol. No.
Yeah, yeah,
the word that I heard the most from her was meth, really.
yeah.
I think she was on meth.
Well, either that or she sounds a lot like my second daughter who, I'm sorry that, Mike, I totally agree. I agreed with everything she said. But I learned a long time ago that rage doesn't get you listened to. And she really looks like she's emotionally out of control.
The word is decompensating.
Okay.
You know, when somebody is in a psychotic break, they can say all kinds of things that you might agree with.
Yeah.
They're likely to say things you might agree with. They're likely to sound quite sane. I've had a good deal of experience of uncomfortable kinds with this. It's just sad.
He also was in Iraq. She was
Is deceased.
Yes. Traumatized. Yes, dear. Traumatized from Iraq.
So, I don't think it's helpful to criticize her. She's not an articulate person, but you could see that she had issues. And she was trying to make a record of how she felt about those issues. And then here she's driving down and not watching the road a whole hell of a lot, which kind of scared me. If I was sitting on the other side of her, I'd be very worried.
Was she actually driving? I thought she was just sitting in the car. Was she driving?
Like the scenery was going by.
She was driving.
Yeah.
I don't know. But at any rate,
A short time later.
about issues that she cared about.
I could not figure out who she was addressing.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, the Congress.
Yeah, but I could not figure out where she was coming from.
She was addressing the Congress.
Well, this may be, but just seeing that for the first time, I could not make hide nor hair of what, what side she was on or what her agenda was. I couldn't.
Well,
I'm
sure she has genuine feelings about some of these issues. But if you look at the certain things she was saying about the homeless population in California, and for some reason it's a continual talking point on right wing about homeless people defecating in places. Like they're like obsessed with the fact that homeless people have to take a crap at some point, and they're run out. They're not allowed to use facilities. They're human beings. They have to go to the bathroom. They don't have a house. What are they going to do? And this is like a huge thing for the right wing that they go to the bathroom. And what it is they stop making it a felony. They don't encourage it or allow it. And it's not like all these Democrat-run cities have people defecating everywhere because they like it that way. No, that's ridiculous. But so I heard like a lot of like right-wing talking points in there. So it sounds like she has like emotional issues and grievance issues that right-wing media has seized on and amplified and exploded.
The thing is, media doesn't have to seize on anything to amplify it. It's just a machine.
Well, but when they repeat things over and over and over again.
Well, I was talking about how attention is power and not information.
Mm.
The machinery doesn't care. The machinery doesn't have an agenda. It's designed to make money out of whatever is the most lucrative commodity. And that happens to be people's attention in the aggregate. So it's an attention grabbing, collecting, mining machine that just keeps on ticking.
Right, but when people watch, whatever media they watch that reinforces their ideas, they get that like dopamine, like rush in their brain, like yes,
Well,
yes,
yeah, I mean,
you're right, you understand. And I
that's
feel like
part of
they
it,
feed
but
on that.
I'm saying that
Like addiction.
that aspect of it is easily explained by its mechanical nature. You don't even need the CIA for that to happen. The CIA's been struggling to keep up with this stuff just like everybody else, because they still think it's about information.
You know, one of the things that scares me is that here we are, a group of people, all who basically agree with each other, and we're out living within our homogeneous cell. Well, the right wing is doing the same thing. I mean, they get on Zoom and they're talking with each other, and it just further isolates us into our little cells.
Are you saying we all might be equally delusional?
Yes.
Well, we're all being worked by the 1%, which is what a number of you have all said. And I think what's really valuable and important is what Mike and Liam are saying is I mean, you look at, I look at her and I responded to her emotion. I mean, I can't imagine being in a relationship with somebody like that. But Mike is right. What she said is something that most people would agree with. Maybe not the human feces part, and especially since Michelle put that into context. But I mean, I think we need to really figure out ways so that all the stuff that people on the right are pissed about, we need to do as much as we can to say, yeah, we are too.
We agree, right?
Yeah.
Let's find where we agree.
And the defecation part is really about homelessness. In the
Yes.
end, it's not about defecation, it's about homelessness.
Yeah.
These people don't have anywhere to go.
It's about, but and a lot of homelessness is about people of color too. So there's a lot of racism going on. I mean, that's a piece of this that a number of you keep ignoring. That I think is really an important part of this. There's a lot of bigotry. A lot of those people that went to that Capitol with their Confederate flags and their new Auschwitz shirts and what have you, they're haters. And we can't forget that, because I don't know that there's a way to build bridges with those people. I don't know. Do you think there are, Mike? I mean, you're the one proposing this the most. What about those?
I do think there is a way to do that. And I think Liam has really touched the core issue, and that is that as soon as the CIA or the United States enters any culture they want to conquer, they figure out, okay, how are the Muslims divided, and how can we, for instance, exacerbate that division? We did it in Vietnam. We do it every time we enter a society. You look at the United States. Okay, what's the big division we could exploit here? Oh, black and white, that's an obvious one. And they've been doing that forever. And that's why the Black Lives Matter movement is so important, because it raises that issue and it raises that dynamic for us so that we can name it and tame it.
There's another part of it too, and that is that the population of the United States is rapidly approaching the point where whites will be in the minority.
Yeah.
And it's so real to me where I live, because I live in a part of Silver Spring where there's a very huge non-white population. And I went to, when I first moved here, I needed to go shopping somewhere, and I looked on the map for a mall. And I went to this mall that I had never been to before. I was the only white person in the whole mall. I swear I was. And
good shopping.
It was really a shocking experience for me, because I had never been the minority, but I mean, I didn't mind, but it just was really different.
I forget the name of that town that you're referring to, but they're all federal employees making really good salaries.
And also, I do think that people seek out their own echo chambers, whether on the left or the right. But I do feel like people on the left have a little bit higher tolerance for cognitive dissonance. It just seems like, I mean, my parents are right wingers. I live in West Virginia, Appalachia. People are pretty homogenous around here. And, you know, I feel like if you challenge them on how they believe, it's like it's almost like psychological survival. It's like you're threatening them that if you change how they think about something, like being gay is okay. Like, oh, if you get me thinking it's okay, then the next thing you know, like, what's next? Then somebody I know going to be gay. Like, it's like they have this paranoia that if they're okay with someone else being different, then all of a sudden it's their way of life will be gone. And you know, you hear a lot of that in the right wing rhetoric, as they play on that. Well, you know, the immigrants are coming here. Laura Ingraham actually said they're changing, you know, America, something in reference to the race. Like, you really just said that out loud. Like that's a real fear of yours, that we're going to not be all white anymore. I mean, so I feel like if we could increase the feeling of security of people in their cognitive dissonance, like it's okay to consider, like just stop and it's okay to think about. Like I try to think how they think. I listen to right wing stuff and I try to understand like what's driving it, how they feel about things. There's zero of that on their side. We're the enemy. They're not. They have to shut us out, shut us down, or we're going to come in and take over their way of life. Like that's their mindset. So how do we get them to like relax a little bit?
Well,
I think part of it is the religion. I think, you know, I wrote years ago, I wrote The Rules of Religion, kind of inspired by Isaac Asimov's Rules of Robotics. And my first rule of religion is that a religion doesn't deserve respect unless it respects other religions. And I think that so many of those people are involved in religions that are based on putting down other religions or saying theirs is the best one. And I think that makes it less likely for them to accept other people's thinking and ways. And Mike, you're my religion expert. What do you think about that?
Well, when you talk like that, Rob, and I recognize the wisdom of that, I can't help thinking of Ken Wilber and the stages of psychological development that we all must go through. We've all been at that stage. I've been at that stage for certain, but I bet everyone here has been at the ethnocentric stage of cognitive development, where we think our group is the only group and our group is the measure of any other group. And for us to blame people for going through a normal stage that we've all been through, there's something off about that.
I would mention that I think this is an aspect of the monkey brain, and it's an aspect of our being that does not disappear just because we grow up.
I thought it was.
Tom has been quiet. I want to hear from Tom, okay?
I think that there are some people who want to go through and want to keep growing, and there are other people. Is it Marilyn? The lady from Appalachia?
Michelle, yeah.
Michelle, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The last thing they want to do is think about going beyond. They're very afraid of going beyond. And that's the issue. If we don't all learn to go beyond, we're all stuck in a big mess.
Well, I was going to say that probably our only hope is evolution. And it's an evolution at the level you can't really be aware of until it happens. You can't see it happening, but it's much faster than some sort of mobilization or educational campaign. 7 billion people are not going to organize themselves with sufficient alacrity to avoid extinction as things stand, but we are evolving.
Yeah.
Tom, you want to finish?
I was just going to say that when I first got into taking politics seriously, I was much more attracted to Malcolm X than I was to Martin Luther King. And I paid attention and I realized the great thing that in my mind those two people had was they never stopped trying to learn and to grow. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they wound up having a lot in common that they didn't to begin with.
Correct.
That's a value system, really, the learning and growing, I think.
Michelle, where you live, how many generations have your neighbors lived there?
Oh, goodness. Well, I can tell you this, my family came here from Ireland in 1850 and lived on 17th Street, which is like a 2-minute drive from here.
Yeah,
They've lived here. They have no desire to travel anywhere, see the rest of the world. And most people that I talk to in West Virginia, that are the older generation I'm talking about, see no interest in anything else in the world. They're Marilyn was saying, they're perfectly happy to just be here in their way of life and don't come in and change it. Things have always can't we just go back to the way things were? That's another reason why Trump won West Virginia, is because he heard all those messages, economic messages, but also he was saying, let's take it back to how it used to be.
yeah.
And
that's
they
right.
love that message.
Good old days.
That's
What
right.
part of
Good old
West
days.
Virginia are you in?
I'm in the northern panhandle, right between Ohio and Pennsylvania. There's the little part that sticks up.
Down in
Are you
Pocahontas
near
County,
Berkeley?
where I used to live. It was a little different because not Pocahontas County, Pocahontas County in Bartow. Life was so miserable hard that nobody wanted to go back to anything. They would have done anything just to get, a few regular meals.
Yeah. But yes, what Michelle is saying is true for lots of places. Somebody told me recently that most people live their lives not too far from where they were born, where they grew up.
Yeah.
Except America is known for being a mobile society.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I mean, like all the black people moved north.
Within the country, but
All the white people ran out of the
Yeah.
cities. All that, it's a churning mess.
Well, but there are certain cultures that don't want to move. Like there are people in West Virginia, like Rob was asking me, people that have just lived here forever, have no desire to go anywhere else, and they don't want any other people, foreigners, coming in here telling us how we're going to change our way of life. They want to keep that isolated perpetuation of their culture. They're so afraid of anything foreign, and it's just, I feel like if we
Heaven, why do you want to go anywhere else?
I didn't want to leave West Virginia when I lived there, but there wasn't anything to do to eat.
Michelle, what about Joe Manchin? Joe Manchin is saying he's gonna block the $2,000 support money that has been talked about. What are people saying about that?
people around here don't like Joe Manchin because they feel especially ever since Trump put a target on his back when he voted against the repeal of Obamacare, which that was the one time I did contact him and said, listen, I realize Trump's demanding your loyalty, but this is going to hurt people bad in West Virginia. And he did respond back to me and he said that he was not going to vote with Trump on that he was going against him because he serves the people of West Virginia. So, I mean, sometimes he's okay, but I mean, I'm not a big endorser of his, you know what I mean? He's the best Democrat you're going to get in a gun-loving, Bible-thumping state. I mean, people don't want to run the party in California and make every Democrat toe a party line, and they say, well, Joe Manchin's not a real Democrat. Well, look, you can have a Joe Manchin Democrat in West Virginia, or you can have no Democrat in West Virginia, because you're not going to take people's guns off of them, and you're not going to make them a liberal culture. But if you focus on worker issues, and this is what we talk about in our podcast all the time, if somebody comes here with worker issues, that's why Bernie won all 55 counties in West Virginia. Hillary didn't win him in the primary. Bernie won him every county in West Virginia.
I didn't know that. That's great.
What about if Lisa Murkowski, would she vote for the $2,000?
It gets interesting.
I don't know about Lisa Murkowski. She's saying she might change parties.
Yeah, exactly. So that she may fill in for Manchin and supply that vote. Who knows?
Yeah.
She said she's not changing parties.
Oh, she's not?
The
She's not
narrative
gonna change
negotiations aren't
And
complete.
she'll probably vote for it because she likes to keep a little bit of a progressive face up there.
Yes, yeah. Now she's from your old turf, Tom.
Yeah, I lived up there for 35 years and met her a few times, and I'm not a real big fan of her, but that's the way she is she likes to try and stay in the middle. And if she can be courageous without without having to risk anything, she's willing to be courageous.
You know, Lisa Murkowski spent time living in Connecticut. And I knew a guy who dated her, who was really in love with her. And her father, who was a big shot political person in Alaska, called her home to get involved in Alaska politics. And so she left. And this guy was absolutely brokenhearted.
Oh.
Well, you know, her father appointed her senator.
David, we haven't heard from you tonight. David, we
Yeah,
haven't
I'm just
heard from-
listening. I'm just listening into everybody's opinion, but no, I think a lot of people are angry on all sides, and I think a lot of people, what they're looking for is a populist, and that's where Trump came in, and he started spouting some populist ideas. Actually, in the very beginning, many of them were, you know, had to do with bringing industry back and things of that sort. But, you know, the Democratic Party then shut out the other populists who probably would have beat him, which is Bernie.
That's true.
So, I mean, you know, and people were attracted to that too. So people are really angry because we now are in, I think, an aristocracy where you have all the money has gone up to the top and less is going down to the bottom. And most of us here are probably middle class or so. And but there's a lot of people below us that are really hurting badly.
The income inequality in the United States
on
is
both
the greatest
sides.
in the entire industrial world.
So I mean, you know, they're angry and they're looking for answers, and they're not getting any answers from the establishment. So they're looking for a populist, and the left hasn't given them an answer.
Well, Huey Long gave them an answer years ago. In
Yes,
Louisiana.
my hero, Kingfish.
Yeah, the Kingfisher. And boy, the poor people loved him.
And they killed him too, right?
No, they didn't. Not the
No,
poor
not they, but I mean the establishment
The
killed
New
him,
Orleans
assassinated
elite
him.
killed him.
Yeah, they don't want anybody on the left. They don't want any populist on the left. They're going to, and this is why I'm so worried about civil rights, because I see this country getting more and more authoritarian. And, you know, that's where I got in the doghouse here with Rob, because I put up the article from Moon of Alabama.
Oh, it was you.
That said, yeah, the Moon of Alabama that said that these were not terrorists. And I agree with them. They weren't terrorists. There were civil disobedience. And actually, probably most of them were lawful. They went there to raise hell, that's for sure. And I don't think, but anyway, that's regardless. One thing I want to say, though, when you use the word terrorist, I think that's a grave insult to people who have really experienced terrorism all over this world, in Syria, and Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Congo, wherever. And you know who has perpetrated that terrorism has been us. So when we get some rowdies that go in there and cause a ruckus in the Capitol, to compare that with the bombing and the droning that we're doing all over the world, I think is
But they brought pipe
David,
bombs and Molotov cocktails. I mean, there was, and they attacked police. They killed a cop. Come on. I mean, this was not just civil disobedience. It went
David,
beyond that.
That's right.
David,
We're
can
not
I ask you a question?
wasn't much different than it wasn't much different than the 60s and 70s.
Do you think that the people that were in there?
And how many? They didn't all have pipe bombs, and they didn't all have Molotov cocktails. The policemen there, I think 3 people died of heart attacks or something like that. The one person that was shot was that woman you showed, and was shot by a cop. So I mean, I don't know. This whole thing is blown way out of proportion, I think, and I think a lot of it is just because people hate Trump so much, and you know, on the left, they just hate him so much that they're.
I don't think so.
The left had nothing to do with this. It was the right. Again, we've got the left getting pulled into it. They had nothing to do with it.
No, the left's commentary. The left's
one of the people who was killed, by the way, was that was first listed as a medical emergency. She was trampled.
Mhm.
She was trampled and crushed, and the cop that was killed was hit in the back of the head with a fire extinguisher.
Okay, well,
So that's
David, do you
not
think the
just,
people inside felt
but I mean,
terrified?
I don't think you can compare those injuries with Obama blowing up funerals and weddings and killing tens and 20s and hundreds of people at a time. That is terrorism. And
I
so,
agree with you on
I
that,
don't-
but to say that if
I
they
agree
went,
with
I can't disagree with that,
if they
but,
went to the Capitol
but
to
you
create
can't,
terror,
Well, it's
in
a
the
matter
furtherance
of
of political
degree, not of kind.
I
but it
mean, the
wasn't terrorism in the
students,
Capitol. That I will
I'm
go
sorry,
along with. It's
Well, they're
not terrorism
threatening
in the
worse.
Capitol.
This was just the first step, according to many people.
Well, technically, terrorism is a way of discrediting a government's ability to maintain order. You know, if there's terrorism, then the
Terrorism,
government is immediately suspect.
Well, that's what's going to happen.
terrorism can be taken back in my time to like the air war in Vietnam, and the people in the Air Force said specifically, we're not just looking to do the damage that we do. We are looking to create psychological terror. And this is from like 1968, 69, this manual that I read. But these people in the Capitol weren't being terrorists. They weren't trying to say, you see, we're going to do it to you if you don't do what we say. These weren't terrorists. They were, as you say, civilly very disobedient, and some of them were perhaps murderous. But they weren't trying to show. They weren't trying to make a demonstration that we're going to do it to you.
They were
they
trying
were
to
making
stop
threats to people.
the certification of Biden.
Okay, Rob, that's true. Keep in mind, the narrative has been established in mainstream media, and the terms terrorist were repeated. The term coup,
calling about another
that this was an
15.
insurrection, and a coup is repeated over and over and over again. That's not what it was. No, it was not a coup. A guy sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk with his feet up on there is not a coup. People milling around the rotunda looking at the statues, not a coup.
Well,
Got a guy
but it's
hanging out
supposed to
there
be.
wanting to put a Trump flag on top of the Capitol.
But if
That's
it
pretty
was, but
scary.
if it's seen as a coup, then it's seen as a failed coup.
Well,
which is more important.
Absolutely.
Because it validates this middle of the road narrative that we have a democracy and a
fans
government.
the flames. It just fans the flames.
David, you got to put your mic closer to your mouth. We can't hear you.
they went there because they were mad as hell and they wanted to be heard. That's all.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
That's-
I
that
disagree with
happens
you.
a
I
lot
think
of
they went
times.
there to terrorize members of Congress in the furtherance of a political ideology, which is their stop the steal belief that the election was rigged. They have a right to that belief, but they don't have a right to go into an area. And if you didn't listen to the people that were inside there, they felt like they were going to be murdered. They experienced real terror that they were going to be killed by those people. That is terror. And if you instill terror through your acts to further your political ideology, that is terrorism. They can be angry as hell as they want and scream. And if they want to set flags on fire in the parking lot, I'm okay with that. But if you terrorize human beings and do real harm and violence to further a political ideology, my book, you're a terrorist. And that counts for Obama and anybody else. And to me, those people were terrorists.
Yeah,
And I think you're going to see more bombings.
We're going to get a lot of anti-terrorist laws that are going to come back to bite us all.
We already have that.
No, we're
Well,
close.
we'll get,
Oh,
you know,
it's going to
the,
be even more. It's going to, you know what? In Florida, they're already passing a law, trying to pass a law that if you go out and demonstrate 2 people or more, and there's some violence that occurs, you're a terrorist.
Yeah.
well, you know, there's whatever that is opportunistically advantageous will happen.
Yes. Martial law, it's called.
Well, the first one is what Trump put into effect, which was a 10-year prison sentence for attacking or hurting monuments. So I think a lot of the people who went into the Capitol are going to be subject to that law.
You know, I was surprised because they are starting to pick these guys up, and they picked up the guy that was sitting in Nancy Pelosi's seat. And
Your sound's fading out, David.
what?
Can you turn up your settings a little bit? Your sound is very low.
I don't know what's wrong.
We've almost lost you, David.
Okay, well, let me try again. They did pick up the guy that was in, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, they did
Yeah.
pick up the guy that was in Nancy Pelosi's seat. And I was surprised because in the newspaper, they said that the charges they gave him had like a 1-year maximum or something like that. So, and I am totally opposed to this, what Rob just mentioned about the 10 years for tearing down a statue. Now, I'm not for tearing down statues necessarily, although maybe some of them should be torn down. But 10 years is pretty excessive. And
I agree. But it's the irony is that Trump created a law that's going to end up punishing his most devout supporters.
He'll pardon
well,
them.
I mean,
Yeah, he
not
might
wrong.
on the 19th. He may just decide to pardon all of those guys who were in there, or all the people who were in there.
What's happening with the impeachment?
Well, that we could have a lot of conversation about impeachment and the 25th Amendment. That's
Well, hasn't it been voted on? At least the Democrats voted on it.
no, they're going to do it on Monday.
Monday.
They've written up the articles.
They've what?
They've written up the articles. And I have a feeling that, I really think that the Republicans don't want to have to vote on it at all, because they don't look good either way. And if they can get away with not doing it, they will. And the way to do that is to get the cabinet to make the decision and Mike Pence to make the decision. Of course, if that happens, then Pence will make a deal with Trump that Trump will resign, and then he'll be pardoned by Pence. And that's what I've been thinking about.
Bob, I read something in the chat that we should pay attention to.
I had a third.
He said spiritual people see our similarities. Religious people see our different. I think that's true.
Yeah, I like that, Bob.
I have a third alternative.
What's that, Bill? You're frozen. It's a good picture of you frozen, though.
For the Joint Chiefs of Staff to make the decision that Pence
Now you're breaking up, but what I think
able to be.
you're really
Can't hear
breaking
you.
up.
Can't
You're
hear
really
you.
breaking up, but Dave Lindor wrote a piece about that this week, where he basically said that the military has already given power to Pence. Pence is already the one making the decisions. Good article by Dave Lindor.
Wow.
Before, with time running out, I just want
Yeah,
to add,
it is.
just want to quickly say that I listened to your podcast with Gary Rosenthal about narcissism, and I was so astonished that of the similarities, in his thinking and this paper that I've most recently
So
posted.
you commented on that.
Yeah. And I was so astonished that I have bought his book, Kindle. I got it already. And I read it most of last night, stayed up most of last night reading it. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, it's a good book.
It's fascinating. The only
What's
difference,
his name?
he uses the word narcissism because he is a therapist. And so I don't think in terms so much of illness to be cured. I think more in terms of character and spirituality, things like that. But it was just amazing. And I think I have a lot more work to do along those lines.
So the interview was on my YouTube channel. I think it's on Op-Ed News too. If you go to opednews.com/podcast, you'll find it.
It is. Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I didn't watch it on Op-Ed News. I watched it on something else, YouTube or something. I don't know what, but yeah, I thought it was. He just has a very.
What did he say that's similar to what you said?
Well, he went all the way back to prehistory.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, and I did the same thing. I mean, it isn't even so, well,
Yes, you did. Yeah.
yeah, he did. And
You
I
did too. Yeah.
And I did. And he particularly drew on the Greeks and Greek tragedy, which I did. And in looking for answers, because he sees narcissism as the same thing as hubris, and I do too. Except that I don't necessarily see hubris as always being a personality disorder. So, I mean, many times it is, I'm sure. Then you talk about narcissism, but it can also be just something that overcomes maybe it overcomes people who have too much money and too much power. They lose their perspective. They lose their sense of who they are, and the power goes to the head. It corrupts absolutely, and that's what we see. And I have long thought, and I've said it before, that hubris is the most dangerous thing in our society, in any society. It should be considered a cardinal sin. The Greeks wanted to make it a crime. They didn't, but they wanted to. Some of them did. A punishable.
We all do it.
It was rampant. It was rampant.
We
Can I
worship it. Our culture worships it.
All right, say that again, Liam.
Our culture worships hubris.
Oh,
Ego.
yes, absolutely, we do.
Yeah.
Well,
Could I make an offer here?
If you want to survive in capitalism, you have to have
Yeah.
you have to be a narcissist if you really want to get ahead.
I would like to offer something. Yeah, I think human beings with their default settings are competent to expand the population. But it takes a lot of training and education and self-mastery to go beyond that.
Yeah.
And it ain't easy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just the way we arrive is sufficient for us to overrun the planet.
Yeah.
But it's not going to do much for the quality of life.
There's another book that I read as I was thinking of doing, on this journey to write this paper. And right now I can't remember the name. I can't remember the title. I remember part of the title. I can't remember the name of the author because, everything goes in one ear and out the other. But it's an interesting book, and it's written by a scholar in one of the universities. And he talks about reverence, and he likens reverence to the same thing as phronesis, what the Greeks thought of as the kind of wisdom that is the opposite of hubris. The wisdom that has humility and moderation and foresight and all of those things. But especially humility, realizing that one is not the highest, greatest power, higher power in the world.
Don't you think it's because, do you think it's because it allows for self-reflection? If you have too much hubris and too much narcissism, it's like you can't reflect on your own actions and what you've done. So you blame other people and you look for other external reasons, and maybe it's you.
I just have to, I looked up the definition of phronesis. Great word.
Yeah.
Romanized, it's an ancient Greek word for a type of wisdom or intelligence. It's more specifically a type of wisdom relevant to practical action, implying both good judgment and excellence of character and habits, sometimes referred to as practical virtue. Boy, are we missing that and needing that today. Wow.
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
In a word, phronesis.
Phronesis.
Spell that. How do you spell that?
Hey.
P-H-O-E-N-I-S-I-S, I think.
P-H-R-O-N-E-S-I-S.
ONESIS.
Meredith, you better write an article about it. Assignment.
It's about 9 o'clock coming up. Has anybody got any burning shares that they want to share?
Yeah, any last minute words here?
I have a couple.
I did.
I'll tell you a piece of good news that came in 10 minutes ago on my cell phone. Apple just banned Parler from its app store.
And Google did also. Google did it earlier today.
Well, that leads to my last thing I was going to tell you is that I don't have Parler, but a friend of mine copied this off of the person who's with the Q movement that has 478,000 followers. And he says, this is in regards to Trump's concession speech. He says, Trump didn't concede. The executive orders are already written. What's about to happen is no longer in his jurisdiction. So the movement is kind of, to use that word, metastasized beyond Trump. So it's inspired by him. But I think it's gotten to the point where it is factionalized, as Liam said. And so these, who knows? You're going to get these lone wolves out there.
It's a power struggle.
Well, that's right.
Everything's up for grabs now.
No question about it.
Yeah.
Everything's up for grabs.
So Ryan is one of the leaders. Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz. These are the people who are kind of going to be leading it after Trump, or in addition.
Hawley's struggling for his life now. He's
good.
Yeah.
He's not going to have a political existence if he
screwed up.
He's desperate.
And Mary, you had something you wanted to say?
A couple of things from my roamings on right wing. If you call them right wing, I don't necessarily. Different websites. Okay. One is that Michael Flynn is or was a Democrat. So some of these right wing and left wing things don't really work for him. And the second one was that there was something released by Lynn Wood saying that Pence and Paul Ryan had a deal and they were going to try and assassinate Trump. So, yeah.
Well,
These
just
are
add
they
that to her
hurry
goal.
up, for God's sake. Now is a good time.
She's one of the
There were
craziest
emails
people
about
out
this.
there. Lynn Wood is the lawyer who is being sued for like $1.2 billion by the voting machine company. And the stuff that she put out there is the craziest.
You're thinking of Sidney Powell.
Right. It's Sidney
Lynn
Powell.
Wood too is a man. Lynn Wood is a male lawyer on Trump's team. Also crazy.
Oops.
Lynn Wood.
Sorry.
And
Yeah, you're right. I was
Sidney
thinking
Powell's the
Sidney
woman, yeah.
Powell. I was thinking of Sidney Powell. Yeah.
If it was really true that Putin is behind all this, we're toast.
Don't worry
And
about
he's
it.
the caviar.
But if you saw how the angry mob chased Lindsey Graham through the airport, what happens, what the Republicans did not calculate is they used this call when they saw it really gaining serious momentum. They thought this is easy votes. These people are super loyal. And they were right. They will vote in a giant block if you are on their agenda. But they didn't count on the fact that now they're requiring loyalty tests. So Lindsey Graham is now enemy number one. Mitch McConnell is enemy. They hate these guys more than Nancy Pelosi right now because they are traitors.
Lindsey Graham was fascinating. His performance, man, it would crack your neck to keep up with that.
Whiplash.
The quickest 180 I've ever seen.
Yeah. And that's why I
McConnell
think
got loyal. He's
He
blocking the
really,
impeachment till January 19th or 20th.
he's not. It's not loyal. It's like look what happened to Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, which Michelle just said.
But
It's
Graham,
deadly for the Republicans to make a decision on that one way or the other. They're in trouble whatever they do.
But look how well Graham knows the lingo.
Yeah.
I mean, when he did that 180, he went way both feet, and he had the vocabulary down. I mean, I loved him. I hated him 2 minutes before. He got the gift of gab, man.
One of the commentators said that on Inauguration Day, they're going to shut down DC.
They're going to have to.
They
Yeah.
ought to shut down DC anyway for that.
Oh, no, it's terrible. One of the consequences of this is that our freedom of speech is going to be severely curtailed.
Yep.
Has been.
Oh,
has
there
been.
are already walls around the White House. Who wants to
that's
go to
true.
Washington anyway? My God.
I've been reading stuff I wrote in 2011 that could have been written yesterday.
I wrote a song in 1978 that could have been written.
Yeah, I bet you did.
yesterday. Called
I wrote a long
called
poem.
The Foreign Policy Blues, and I wrote it in the middle of the Iran hostage crisis.
Oh
And
my
now we've
God.
got to
Oh, you're sounding like R2D2 there, Bill.
Yeah, you
Can't hear you.
got a lot. You got a lot of lag in your broadcast.
I was gonna ask Bill if he'd ever run into Mike Mirapol. Did you know the story? You know that when the
No.
Rosenbergs were put to death for giving away the atomic bomb secrets, they had two kids.
Right.
One of them was named Mike Mirapol, and the kids were adopted by a man named Mirapol and grew up with him as their father. And Mike Mirapol became a folk singer for many, many years. He wrote a lot of protest songs. And now he's a professor of economics at someplace around here in New York State, I think. And he's he's a great thinker and everything. But his stepfather, Mirapol, is the guy that wrote Strange Fruit.
That's right.
Oh.
Which is what?
Strange Fruit, Billie Holiday's great hit.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's Strange Fruit, for those of you that don't know the song, is people hanging lynched from a tree.
Oh my God.
Oh, if you haven't ever heard it, look it up online. It's worth listening.
Yeah.
By the way, we have a whole bunch of Robert Mirapol, the son of the Rosenbergs.
Yeah.
A contributor to Op-Ed News. He's done 19 articles with us.
Oh, cool. Right. I think I've seen him around there somewhere. That's Mike's brother.
One of them was an economist. The other one became an attorney.
Yeah. Robert's the attorney, I think.
All right. We're a half an hour over. We're 2 hours into this. Thank you all. And let's
Thank you very much for doing this.
call it a night.
All night.
Good night.
One more. Joe, one more time with the shirt. All right. Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night,
night.
everybody.
All right.
Good
Love you
night.
all.
Good night.
Stay in peace.
Ciao.
Blessings.
Stay safe.